Moorish, Orthodox, radio, crusade, anarchism for the global city. Radical environmentalism for the concrete jungle. Esoteric explorations of the secret history of rebel culture. The Moorish Orthodox Radio Crusade. Exiled from WBAI 99.5 FM in New York City. Now only on the World Wide Web. Be there.
Well, you know, one thing I'd really like to know is why I am seeing from all of my left-wing friends on Facebook the exact same line that I'm getting from Donald Trump, which is that, Obama and Hillary created ISIS. I'm getting it line for line verbatim. Exactly what El Pendejo is saying, I'm getting from all of my, supposed left-wing progressive friends on Facebook. And, I get really tired of having to shoot down the jive over and over and over again. Because if I were to do nothing but shoot down the jive, then I wouldn't have time to do anything else. Like, for instance, my paid work that I need to do to pay the rent. So, it's extremely frustrating. And I'm also really tired of the baiting. So immediately, because of, the totalizing propaganda environment that exists on Facebook, about which I'll have more to say later, immediately, just from this preface, anybody who my comments are directed at is going to be dismissing me as, a Hillary supporter. And, engaging in the typical ad hominem fallacy that, oh, you're just saying that because you're a Hillary supporter. And I should make clear here that I'm using, ad hominem in its technical sense. It's actually a fallacious form of argument. It's not just name calling. Okay, now when I engage in name calling, I'm a really good name caller. I don't, I try to avoid using the name Trump because the name is exactly how this whole thing got started, with his obsession with seeing his name in the newspaper and on TV and on the internet and on the side of buildings. I mean, this basically turned into this has started out as an exercise in ego aggrandizement, which got out of control and is now, escalated to the point where he may actually become the president. I mean, according to the recent polls, it's less likely, thank goodness, but still not a threat to be dismissed. And he's playing to open fascism, and I make no apologies for using that word because that's what he's doing. So I like to say the actual word Trump. I try to avoid it. So I call him the pendejo. And yeah, that's name calling. And he's certainly earned it. I would say he's earned the epithet, he's a pendejo. But that's not ad hominem, because I'm not making an argument. The ad hominem fallacy is when you say, oh, you're saying that because you're a pendejo. You're saying that because you're a Hillary supporter, as opposed to actually addressing the substance of your argument. I mean, with the pendejo, there isn't any substance of the argument to actually address. He's not really making arguments. He's just spewing hate. But I'm making an argument, okay? And I want to make clear that, I don't like Hillary. I can't stand Hillary. And I've, repeatedly called Hillary out on her adherence to the agenda of free trade, militarization. I think that she's thoroughly odious to the core. I think that she's an ambitious dynasty builder. And I've essentially got nothing good to say about her except for one thing. She's not the pendejo. But that's actually a very considerable thing. Because, as I say, we are facing a genuine fascist threat in this country at the moment. And it is utterly disingenuous to, say that there's no difference between the two candidates. I mean, there clearly is a difference. Then there's one candidate who actually represents a unique threat to democracy in this country, okay? One candidate who was actually quite openly fascistic, and the other candidate who is a mainstream Democrat, and I say that with no love. That's not an exoneration. You know, I've been opposing mainstream Democrats all my damn life, and opposing their policies, opposing free trade agreements, opposing the militarization of the hemisphere, opposing Plan Colombia, which began under President Bill Clinton, etc., etc. So when I say they're mainstream Democrats, that's not an exoneration. I don't like mainstream Democrats, okay? But again, it's willfully self-deluded to pretend that there's no difference between a mainstream Democrat, who basically means continuance of the status quo, and a candidate who is openly played to hate and racism. So, again, I want to know, first of all, let's dismiss with the ad hominem fallacy, the ad hominem attack that Bill Weinberg is just saying this because he likes Hillary. I don't like Hillary. I actually can't stand Hillary. And I, consider voting for Hillary to be an odious duty. And we have to vote for her with no illusions and be absolutely prepared to resist her and oppose her from her first day in office. If we're lucky enough, to be facing a President Hillary as opposed to a President Pendejo, who would be a far more formidable enemy. Now, they would both be enemies, okay? But the President Pendejo would be the far more formidable enemy. So, all right, let's dismiss with the ad hominem argument, okay? I want to know why I am seeing the exact same nonsense from my supposed left-wing allies that we're getting from the Pendejo, that ISIS was created by Obama and by Hillary, which is just factually untrue. And not only factually untrue, but a complete absurdity. If you have been following the situation in Syria and Iraq for the past 10 years at all, it's a complete absurdity. And the problem is with the very nature of Facebook and social media. This is what nobody wants to acknowledge. Now, there's a lot. I spend my whole goddamn life on Facebook, so I'm as guilty as anybody, okay, of being a Facebook addict. And I recognize that there's a lot of things about Facebook which are very, very convenient and very nice, which is what draws us in. It's actually a very convenient way of sharing information, reconnecting with old friends. The friends I haven't spoken to in 20 years or more, I now, hang out with on Facebook every day, and that's great. So believe me, I understand the lore of Facebook. But, any reader of science fiction or future dystopia will know that that's always how it works, right? It's always like, it's the, there's a lore, as in, Aldous Huxley's Brave New World being the classic model, where, it's something very, very seductive about it at the same time that it takes away all your freedom. And the most critical thing which Facebook is taking away is our ability to think and analyze and actually get information and get news with at least a certain sense of distance and objectivity. Because we all live with Facebook, we all live in a totalizing propaganda environment where, for starters, you tend to friend, using friend as a verb, you tend to friend people who share your political views. So there's already a, sort of a mutual reinforcement thing going on, a confirmation bias thing going on, where all of your friends are, feeding you information and posts and memes that you already agree with. And then that problem is compounded by the evil, insidious Facebook algorithm, which prioritizes the material that you have liked, or material which is similar to material which you have liked, quote unquote. So the algorithm is actually designed to entrench groupthink and tunnel vision, rather than actually giving you some information which is going to challenge you some information which is going to shake up your assumptions rather than merely entrenching your assumptions. And this is where, I hate to say it because, I have been dedicated to alternative media my entire life, okay? My CV looks like an FBI dossier, or maybe my FBI dossier looks like my CV. Where, I worked for High Times magazine, I wrote for The Guardian News Weekly, and I've got my own websites, countervortex.org and globalganjareport.com, etc., which is supposed to provide some kind of an alternative. But increasingly I find that, I'm not only providing an alternative to the dreaded MSM, the mainstream media, I'm also providing an alternative to the so-called alternative media, which is increasingly just as bad as the mainstream media. And what's going on now with the internet is that, everybody is turning to, websites which share their worldview and thinking that, they're being so much smarter than all of the sheeple out there who are getting their information from the MSM because, I'm getting my information from some cool, radical, edgy website like Counter Vortex. But in reality, now I would like to think that on Counter Vortex I actually do have certain standards for factual content and fact checking and basic intellectual rigor. But on a lot of these extremely partisan websites out there, particularly the ones which are engaging in these conspiranoid theories about how Obama created ISIS, they're just making stuff up, or they're basing it on a little grain of truth which they completely decontextualize and blow out of proportion without looking at all the countervailing evidence. Now, at least whatever you want to say about the Washington Post and the New York Times, they employ real journalists. They actually have editors. They actually have fact checkers and copy editors. And now, due to downsizing, not as many as they did 10 years ago, and that's a problem, okay? But at least there's still some semblance of, somebody watching the store. Whereas, at Counterpunch and Mint Press and all these other ones which I'm seeing posted on Facebook all day long, spreading nonsense, there's nobody watching the shop. And I really wonder where we're going with all this, because it gets harder and harder and harder to fight the disinformation all the time. And even on top of these sort of confirmation bias websites, then you've just got the plain old pseudo news websites. I believe there's one called National Report, where they're simply putting out false news, which is very alluring and sensationalist, but not true, to get clicks. Actual pseudo news, which people are actually cluelessly sharing as if it was real news. So, here we are in this country on the brink of a potential fascist takeover if we actually get a Pendejo victory. Not to mention that, we've got global warming totally out of control, and we've got, we've got ISIS and Assad and potential World War, new superpower confrontation looming over multiple flashpoints around the world, from Syria to Ukraine, etc. We've got ISIS gaining ground throughout the greater Middle East, and any other number of really horrific, urgently pressing problems which we have to contend with. And meanwhile, nobody is really addressing or thinking about what the hypertrophy of the internet and social media is doing to our ability to get information, to think, and to analyze, which ultimately is critical to understanding and addressing all of those other seemingly more urgent problems. So, I think about this, and I have to say it really fills me with a great deal of angst and frustration, as you have no doubt been able to glean from my little rant here. Thank you. Oh, and since I was ranting about the dystopian nature of social media, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And also check out my website, countervortex.com.